Okay, so let's be honest, right? AI is extremely helpful, but if you're not careful, it can really ruin your learning process when it comes to learning to code. So in this video, I want to share how I use AI while learning to code. I want to walk you through the exact approach that I take when I get stuck, how I use tools like ChatGPT to get better at coding, not necessarily lazier, and let it affect my learning process, and just give you some real advice that I wish I had a bit earlier, navigating the learning process with AI. So when did I first start using AI to help me learn to code? It was actually towards the end of the data structures and algorithms section on Free Codecamp. Some of those final exercises, final sort of programs that you have to write towards the end of the course, they start to get pretty challenging. And I was also losing a little bit of patience as well, because I'd been doing Free Codecamp for a couple of months now, and this data structures and algorithm section was quite lengthy. So I just kind of wanted to get to the end of it. And needless to say, I probably should not have used AI towards the end. I know a lot of seasoned programmers would completely disagree with using AI, especially at the beginning, you know, those first few critical months. Now, I have to say, I didn't use it in the first, couple of months that I was on Free Codecamp. It was really towards the end, like month 3, that I started to get AI to help me understand some of the concepts that I was learning. So because I really wanted to solve some of these last few exercises, and I wanted to do it quickly because I wanted to start building things on my own, I did turn to AI because I didn't fully understand what some of these questions were asking me to do. That's when I turned to ChatGPT, not necessarily to give me the answer, but to rephrase the question, rephrase the exercise, and I drop a prompt and ask something like, can you explain this to me in a different way? And so towards the end of some of these exercises, I wasn't just completing them just for the sake of checking off a tick box. I was completing these exercises with an actual understanding of what I was doing. And I think that is the real power of using AI while learning to code. The ability to change the context, to reframe it, to explain it to you in a different way. What I realized is the best use for AI is not to write the code for you. It is to help you understand the why behind it, right? Instead of just taking your code and dumping the problem and copying the output, it's about interacting with the program and asking it deeper questions so that you understand what's happening, right? It's about asking, what does this function do? Can you give me a real world example? How would this particular logic work in a restaurant? How would this particular logic work in a household or a factory? Being able to ask these questions is such a game changer. And this is one of the ways that I would suggest to you to start using AI while you're learning to code. Get it to reframe things, ask deeper questions, and really build a solid understanding of what you're actually doing. And so when I think about it, AI for me is less about being this solution machine and more about just being a second brain, right? Something to help me see things from a different and new perspective. So if you are serious about learning to code, one question matters more than anything, and that is, why is the code here? Why are we using this particular line of code, right? Why would you use an if-else statement instead of using a try-catch statement? Why structure the logic this way? Why do we need to use this particular function? Why do we need to run this particular parameter? Why are we using this particular API request? These are important questions. There never has been a better time in history to actually learn something very specific that you are trying to learn and get it to answer you in so many different ways. And so once I started using AI for this particular purpose, everything just kind of clicks a lot more easier. Obviously things are hard, but being able to get answers in a frame that, I can understand is really helpful. How I use AI when I get stuck now is I don't just copy the entire file or page of code that I'm using into ChatGPT and just get it to try and help me out. I don't think that's very helpful. I don't really recommend you to do that, especially while you're learning early on. Instead, what I do is I find myself grabbing that specific line of code that's giving me grief, and I'll put that into AI and I'll ask it questions like, what's happening here? Why is this error happening? What would be a better way to write this? And then I'll go a step further, right? I'll ask the AI to teach me why that particular fix works, guide me through it, just coach me through it. You don't just want it to write out the line of code for you, but you want to understand why that is the particular solution. Here's a really crucial thing that I recommend you do as well, is that if AI gives you a block of code or a line of code or whatever it is, don't just copy paste it. Write everything out or type everything out by hand, because when you are typing it out, and I notice this for myself, I slow down and I catch things that I don't really understand. And that's when I can go back and get it to explain, why have you given me this? And I think that is where the real learning happens. Because we now have this amazing tool, there is this huge danger of dependency on AI. I would say that if you are in your first couple of months of learning, don't use it at all. Like seriously, I mean, I didn't touch AI in the beginning when I was learning because I know that I had to build the muscle memory of solving problems on my own. And if you skip that part, you're building a house on sand, basically, right? All you're doing at that stage is you're just copying code and you're just not building the right foundation. And if you don't have the right foundation, everything else is not going to make sense to you. It's like trying to write a novel and you don't know how to read, right? It doesn't make any sense. You got to learn to read first to write. Coding is exactly the same. You have to know the fundamentals before you can sort of level up your skills. And so the old way is kind of, using Stack Overflow, using Google to find the answers. So the question is using ChatGPT or Cursor the same as Googling or using Stack Overflow? Obviously not really, right? Stack Overflow forces you to scroll through like 5 to 10 different solutions. Sometimes they're not even relevant to you, but along that process, you pick apart what works, you understand what doesn't apply to you as well, and you learn from how other people approach the same problem in different ways as well. And that is tremendously valuable. So when you can, try not to make AI the first stop for solving a problem. Try and just Google it first or use Stack Overflow, because the breadcrumbs that you pick up along the way to come to your solution while doing this process helps you build so much more understanding, and you can take lessons from those particular comments or those solutions that are provided on some of these forums to use for other problems down the track. Because with AI, you're usually just getting one solution at a time. It's still helpful, but it's a different way of finding a solution. And when you do start building your own projects or even working as a software engineer, believe it or not, AI is not going to be able to help you with everything. It doesn't happen like that. So building the skill of just researching and solving the problem on your own is a vital part of being a software engineer. I would say it's probably the most important part of being a software engineer. The message here is don't skip those old school research skills. They are still gold and you still should be using them. So now, because you do have AI at your fingertips and you're probably using it a lot in your day-to-day, how do you know if you're actually learning anything? Well, I think a really simple test to know if you're learning things is that if you get the solution through ChatGPT or Cursor, can you shut down the program or shut down the software, the AI software that you're using, and then go and write the code yourself? If you can, then you've learned that thing, right? You know what you're doing. If you can't, then you obviously have some work to do, right? And that's fine. That's how we grow. But I think it's a really good litmus test for yourself to know that while you're using AI, you actually know what you're doing. You're just getting it to help you prompt along and finish whatever you're working on a lot faster. Because really the goal isn't necessarily to memorize the syntax, but it is to understand how to solve problems. And like I've said before, I think that is really what developers are paid to do. So here are some really smart ways, I think, to use AI without killing your progress of learning to code, right? The first is like always ask to explain why it's giving you that particular solution. Ask a lot of questions. That is a great way of using AI. Why are we using this approach? Why this method? Why this particular structure? Also, if you don't understand the concept, another thing you can do is ask it to reframe it, give you a metaphor, put it in a real world situation, provide you a program where this particular code will be most useful. And another really smart way of using AI right now is to ask it to give you a visual representation of what that line of code is or what that block of code is. Get it to give you like either a flow chart or just write it out for you. This is extremely helpful. I find myself doing this so much. Visuals really help me to understand and pick up concepts a lot faster. And it's got to be one of the best ways to use AI to understand what you're working on, to give you a clear breakdown of the logic, that you're working through. I mean, that has to be one of the best ways of learning with AI. So I encourage you, wherever possible, if you are getting stuck, ask it to give you a visual representation of what you're working on. And then another really good prompt is to just explain it to you like you're 5 years old. It can break down the problem in smaller chunks and it's just so much more digestible, and it really helps you to unblock some of those like sort of more complicated concepts and then piece things together. So that's another great prompt that I use, is just to explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Sometimes it does give you some pretty childish metaphors, so you can even ask it to explain it to you like you're 10. That also helps too. So some of my final advice for beginners is that if you're building your first project just using HTML, CSS, and maybe a little bit of JavaScript, you don't need AI. You really don't. Don't use it, refrain from using it. You can do it yourself with some basic Googling, turn off the autocomplete, shut down the AI program cursor, whatever you're using, and just go through it yourself with some trial and error, because these programs, they're fairly rudimentary, they're fairly simple, so you can get through them. And so that is my advice. Don't use AI, especially in the first few months. It's just completely unnecessary. Build that muscle memory, build the foundations, understand the logic. It's just going to help you so much more along your kind of learning process. If you are using it, make sure that you understand what it's spitting out to you. If you can't explain it back to someone what it is that you're using in your own words, then you probably don't have a full command of what it is you're working on. So that means you've got some work to do. Go back, figure it out. The right way to use AI means that you are breaking down problems, you're getting context, you're rewriting the code, and most importantly, you are able to explain these concepts in your own words. That's how you know that it's clicking. That's how you know that you fully understand what you're working on. So yeah, anyway, that's my take. That's how I use AI to spotlight my learning, to help me get better, and to keep supporting me as I keep learning more and more about code and programming and all that sort of thing as well. And really taking a very proactive approach to not letting it do the majority of work for me. And I think it's just so critical, especially in that sort of beginning learning phase. So yeah, look, if you found this helpful, let me know. Love hearing from you guys in the comments. If you're using AI for your learning, how have you been using it? Do you feel like it's been helpful? Also, if you guys want to join my free newsletter, please check out the link in the description below. Would love to have you there, sending out more tips like this as well. So if you're interested, please check it out. But yeah, good luck, keep going, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.